beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, of light, a dimension of mind. You're moving into the land of both shadow and objects, of both things and ideas. You've just crossed into the detecting zone. There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, of light, a dimension of mind. You're moving into the land of both shadow and objects, of both things and ideas. You've just crossed into the detecting zone. There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, of light, a dimension of mind. You're moving into the land of both shadow and objects, of both things and ideas. You've just crossed into the detecting zone. There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, of light, a dimension of mind. You're moving into the land of both shadow and objects, of both things and ideas. You've just crossed into the detecting zone. There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, of light, a dimension of mind. You're moving into the land of both shadow and objects, of both things and ideas. You've just crossed into the detecting zone. There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. How's everybody doing? Uh, so I decided to do a quick stream today. The stream I made yesterday was deleted due to copyright. I had added an extra intro in my stream, and that had some footage of Rod Serling from the new Twilight Zone, and that was copywritten. But it's okay. I'll just quickly go over what I went through yesterday. My channel's not dead. I haven't posted in 2 months, but I'm still here. I was going through personal stuff. I'm not working currently, but my wife is working, and that's good enough for now. Until this whole COVID thing is over, we're just going to have to figure out what's going on. But with that said, I haven't done a becoming well-read video, and this is a video series I was doing before where I would read a book and then talk about it and then tell you the next book I'm reading. And so yeah, I decided to do that, but in the format of live stream today, just because it's a lot easier to do this way than to make a whole video and edit it and do all that jazz. So I just finished reading Pet Cemetery by Stephen King. Has anybody read this book? Cause oh my god, it's so good. I know that there was a recent remake to the movie of Pet Cemetery. I think it was a year or two ago. They remade this movie. I didn't go see it in theaters, but I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and there were a lot of things I noticed in this book that just gained my attention. And I wanted to, think about it critically and just talk about it a bit more. One of the things I noticed the first and second time uh, the main character Lou went to the pet cemetery was that there was a lot of mist. He went through part of the forest that was sort of hidden, like hard to get to. If you don't know, that you have to climb over a sort of deadfall with a bunch of dead trees, a dangerous deadfall, then yeah, and there was mist beyond that point in a place that was sort of like a swamp-like area. And I really loved the way Stephen King brought that mist in, and it reminded me of another book he had written. It reminded me of the mist in, if you have Skeleton Crew, there's a story called The Mist in Skeleton Crew. I think it's the first story. Let's see. Yeah. Hopefully you guys can see that. The Mist. And The Mist was made into a movie. I think it was also made into a TV show. Don't quote me on that. There's definitely a movie though. And sort of creatures live in the mist. And if you've read the Dark Tower series, you know where those creatures come from. Pennywise the clown, you know where he comes from if you read the Dark Tower series. But that sort of made an interesting, sort of another interesting connection in my mind, because Lou, after he goes through the mist and he enters the cemetery where things are buried. Well, before he enters the cemetery where things are buried, he sees something. He sees something called a Wendigo. Wendigo, and that is sort of like a evil spirit. Indian cultures believe in the Wendigo, and if you're touched by it, or if you're like approached or get to close proximity to a Wendigo, you sort of having weird desires like cannibalism and things like that. And it's mentioned like 3 or 4 times in Pet Cemetery, but it's also mentioned in The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, about the girl who gets lost in the woods. I have to reread this, but yeah, really interesting there. About Indian spirits and evil things like that. The Wendigo is also associated with like overconsumption and greed and just destroying the environment and general bad stuff too. It's not only about cannibalism, but yeah, it's one of those things where I was reading through Pet Cemetery. Have you guys ever read this book? I was reading through it and I just finished it today, and I figured why not come and talk about it while things are fresh in my mind. I think uh, I don't think the movies would have ended it the way the book ended it. There was not really a resolution. There was a resolution for Gage, his son, that he had buried and came back to life. And Gage comes back, murders a few people. But at the end of this book, he ends up, and spoiler alert, saying it now, he ends up burying his wife. His wife. And it's just really strange that she comes back to life and there's no resolution for what happens to his daughter Ellie. What do the grandparents think? Does he end up killing his wife? Does his wife end up killing him? And so I would be interesting to see the Pet Cemetery movies, both of them, the old one and the remake. Uh, but yeah, that's Pet Cemetery. Very good, very interesting lore here, adding to the Stephen King universe. And if you guys like eerie stuff like that, book recommendations, I would recommend this. I would recommend this more than I would recommend the old Twilight Zone by Rod Serling or Nightmare Hour by R.L. Stine. Um, Stephen King is definitely one of the top writers when it comes to this type of fiction, when it comes to this type of work. Very interesting, very good stuff. Um, yeah, I haven't been out metal detecting in some time, and I want to go, but I'm here stuck at home. You know, there's still sort of a quarantine coming out, and I've seen videos from New York. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's relevant to the times of in some places cops are handing out masks to people who don't have them, and in other places they're handing out summons and tickets to people who don't have them. So I think just for my own safety, it's probably better that I stay at home, not go anywhere, not go metal detecting. Even though a lot of my friends are going out metal detecting. Meryl's been metal detecting almost every day. I know Lou has stuff planned. Rob has been going out metal detecting. Carlos has been out a few times. But yeah. I'm staying at home and I'm keeping safe, and that's why I haven't put out any metal detecting content. But after this whole COVID-19 stuff is over, I will be putting out that sort of content again. Um, but yeah, just finished reading Pet Cemetery. Very excited about it. Um, yeah, a lot of unanswered questions at the end of this book, and Stephen King sort of has a multiverse where a lot of his books are connected, and they actually connected this book to a few other ones. I think there was mention of Cujo in here. There might have been mention of Greg Stilson from the Dead Zone, but I'm not sure about that. Not sure about that. Okay, so I'm trying to find the space on my shelf where I put this. There you go. That kind of spot right there. And the girl who loved Tom Gordon also goes right there as well. Yeah, so the next book I plan on reading, hopefully not too far off in the future. I can read this book. Um, Probably should start it sooner rather than later. Is The Talisman. And this one's interesting because I've never read it. And it's an older book, a lot older. Um, and I'm excited to go through it. It's a pretty long book, yeah, 600 pages. So it's definitely longer than in terms of page number than Pet Cemetery. But yeah, definitely ready to sink my teeth into this bad boy. Hey, Detectaholics, how you doing? Is this Marilyn or Dennis? Either way, did you guys enjoy that video, the interview with Joe Rogan? I really enjoyed that. John, that Aykroyd, what was his name? Yeah, Aykroyd, the actor from Ghostbusters, and Joe Rogan. That was an amazing interview. Just the amount of stuff that they talked about. Joe Rogan's been interviewing a lot of interesting people recently. I don't know if you guys follow his podcast. He posts every few days on YouTube. Update to his podcast. I don't know if it's regular. Yeah, what did you think about that? Just the stories there that Aykroyd had to tell. Also, I've never tasted his vodka, but the fact that it comes in a nice crystal skull just intrigued me. Maybe I might try it one day. I don't know. I'm not a big vodka drinker. I'm more of like a one beer and I'm done sort of person. I don't like sort of to feel drunk, but sometimes I drink a beer when I'm amongst friends. So yeah, definitely interesting. A lot of the stories, if you look them up, like just don't take like what Aykroyd says. If you look up the stories yourself, and you see like the story of the Ariel school children or of Betty and Barney Hill, they're interesting, and there's like a lot of evidence to back up their claims. You have one? Interesting. Oh, you have. Are you talking about the crystal skull I was talking about before? Because that crystal skull just looks really cool, really interesting. Yeah. So, like I said earlier, I finished Pet Cemetery today. The video I posted yesterday never saved because it had copyrighted content, which is fine. I knew it did. I was half expecting it, but I was like, sort of, I have that vodka. Oh yeah, cool. They were eating it, I think, with lemon, which was interesting. Usually, Coke, Coca-Cola, and vodka. I would think would mix. I've never had it with citrus though, so that was just interesting. Um, yeah. So I just finished Pet Cemetery today, feeling a bit weirded out by that, but it's all good because I'm working my way through a lot of the books in my collection, and I'm having fun with it. I'm having fun with it. It didn't end the way I thought it would end. It sort of ended abruptly, and it seems like Stephen King at the end of Pet Cemetery was just like done. Orange. Oh yeah, he was eating it with orange. Yeah. That was just an interesting interview all around. They covered so many things. Uh, some of the things that they covered, I was like less, and that actually there's a sort of connection with Pet Cemetery too. He was talking about Bigfoot, the Yeti, the abominable snowman, the great, ape man of the north, whatever you want to call him. But yeah, they were talking about, Bigfoot sightings, and Aykroyd believed this true, and Joe Rogan was more of a skeptic on that. But in Pet Cemetery, there's actually a being called the Wendigo, and the Wendigo is sort of is like an evil, huge, sort of mammalian. The way they describe the sharp teeth and the snout and the horns coming out of it, being that was sort of seen and believed by a lot of Indian cultures. And I looked it up separately, outside of this book, because I'm like, the Wendigo, is that something that Stephen King made up, or is it something that has some basis in, what some people truly believe? And it does have basis in what a lot of the Indian cultures truly believe. And they have a lot of different names for the Wendigo. And it's just creepy the way, the stories are with that, where if it gets close to you, you sort of resort to cannibalism. And you think about the tribes, they don't always have food. And, it could come out of a myth, like you have to come up with a reason for, if you're starving, you'd eat anything, and the mind goes to dark places. And sort of, it could have been brought out a myth from that, rationalizing, well, why would they eat someone else? Oh, it could be because they were starving, but no, we need another reason because it's not a human thing to do. So let's embody it in the Wendigo, where if this creature comes close to you, you know, you will be resort to those things. And there's actually an interesting, and it's not mentioned in the book. It's not mentioned in the book, but there's an actual, if psychological problem that some people have called Wendigo psychosis. I'll write it down. Wendigo psychosis. So Wendigo psychosis is when a person is sort of predisposed towards having cannibalistic thoughts, and it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy, because you sort of feel the need to eat flesh, to eat, human flesh, and you sort of have to stop yourself. It's not like an addiction, but you sort of, because you need, like, addictions are predisposed. Like once you've smoked cigarettes for a while, you get addicted to it. But even people who've never resorted to cannibalism, they might have Wendigo psychosis. Yeah, I know, it's scary. It's scary. Where you want to eat flesh and you have that craving, and it's crazy. It's kind of scary. Yeah, just thinking about this beast, this monster, the way Stephen King describes him, his snout and his ears, which aren't ears but they're really horns, and the way his eyes were, I think they were yellow and sunken. Yeah, it was creepy. It was really creepy. I really liked the book though. I really liked Pet Cemetery. It gave me chills, and I wanna see the movie. Well, there's two movies out for Pet Cemetery. There was an original one from back in the day, and then there's a more recent one. They keep remaking his movies. They had remade It, and I think the new It that had came out, both new Its were more critically acclaimed than the original one. The original It that had come out. If you see it now, it's not as scary as the new ones. And I wonder if they're trying to do like a bigger multiverse for Stephen King, because the Wendigo in Pet Cemetery, Pennywise from It, and a lot of the other creatures, Randall Flagg from The Stand, they come from a certain uh, series of books called
The Dark Tower, which Stephen King wrote. It's sort of like his sci-fi series of books. The original is good. Oh, okay, maybe I'll look into the original It and the original Pet Cemetery as well. I wanted to sort of see the movies after I read the books. And I have like a list online of all the books that I've read, whether they're Stephen King or not Stephen King. I actually read this one right before I was let go from my job back in October of last year. And although the Twilight Zone, the series, is good, this book is sort of heavy. It's really heavy, and it's mostly about ghost stories, if I remember correctly. Um, yeah, yeah, it's all ghost stories actually. And it's okay, but I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for a good ghost story. Stephen King is definitely the way to go so far. And I've tried reading other things. I've tried reading, other uh, authors, and a lot of authors are good, but they don't give you that same feeling of an epic world the way Stephen King does. Stephen King has created throughout all his books. It's sort of a separate universe parallel to ours where things are very similar but they're very different. There's extra towns in his universe, and the Dark Tower sort of explains how everything is connected, all the parallel universes and stuff like that. It's really interesting. But yeah, Wendigo psychosis is a real thing, and the Wendigo, it's a real belief amongst Indian cultures, and it's interesting that he was able to incorporate that into the book Pet Cemetery, even though there was no cannibalism in Pet Cemetery. In Pet Cemetery, the animals that were they were buried, and they weren't really buried in the Pet Cemetery. It was beyond the Pet Cemetery. You have to, because the Pet Cemetery is just where kids bury their pets. And then there's sort of a deadfall, which is like a collection of dead trees. And then you have to go up above that. It's sort of dangerous, but if you have to go above that and walk beyond through a swamp, it's sort of like 3 miles past the Pet Cemetery. You bury people in a clearing area, and there was one point where Lou is walking through there, and he's describing the plants, and he's saying these plants, like, he doesn't remember plants like that ever. Like, where did they come from? Like, do they exist really, or is he somewhere else? And I think he did go into a different world, into a different dimension. It's not mentioned in the book that way, but I think that is what is happening, because in the short story The Mist, which is a completely different story, there's scientists that are doing sort of experiments, and they open up a world to a different dimension, and the mist is sort of coming out, and there's huge creatures coming out from the mist. And the fact that the Wendigo, they describe him as being extremely tall to the point where he's knocking down trees. Think about the abominable snowman and make him the size of a tree. Like, freaking scary, right? And yeah, it's just really interesting that it all sort of comes together, the different stories, even the breathing method. The breathing method is a really good story King had written about people that go to this library here in New York, and they talk about sort of stories. They share stories, they read stories, and this library has books that were never published by authors that everybody knows, but books that were never published, things that are sort of don't belong in this world, if that makes sense. And the library itself is the mystery, even though the story is about is a story that someone is telling in the library. The place itself is a mystery because it has doors into other dimensions, and into other realms and places, like the Dark Tower, like the place where the mist is coming from, like the place where Pennywise comes from in It. Sort of this multiverse is getting interesting. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video, talk about Pet Cemetery for a little bit, just because I read it and it's just so damn interesting to me. But yeah, guys, I am doing fine. I'm doing fine. And again, my last video was sort of taken down, so I'll just explain. I only have about 10 minutes left, so I'll just explain very quickly what I explained in my last stream, because that was taken down. Sort of right before this whole pandemic thing happened, I had started a new job at NYU Langone. I couldn't continue there just due to my own stress and personal reasons. The day I called them to let them know that I wouldn't be returning, I was on a probation period, so it was okay for me to leave, or for them to have me leave, if either party didn't like the relationship. And so, or at least that's how it was explained to me. And so when I left, that was the same day that my wife, who had also just started a new job, earlier that week, started to work from home. So it was sort of fate that we've been spending this time together. We're not at each other's throats. We're actually really loving each other and being, you know, sheltering in place together. We're like more like, how do you call it? Uh, we're like, me and her are just a community of two, sort of, and we've been keeping each other sane. I think right now she's working. She has about 10 minutes left, but yeah, I haven't been out just due to coronavirus concerns and things like that. And so there was a video that I could have posted, but I lost the footage, and so that's why since February there's been no uploads to this channel. But don't worry, I really do want to get out, and I'm going to continue reading and doing live streams, and hopefully putting out content similar to this, where I come in, I start just talking about different things, and maybe the conversation goes elsewhere. Maybe somebody says something or asks questions, or starts something that interests me, and I do research, and I come back and we talk about it some more, hopefully. So I do want to up my sort of live stream game. I don't want to leave you guys empty handed, even though this is a metal detecting channel. I'm not metal detecting recently due to the coronavirus thing. I don't want to leave this channel dead for months on end, like it's been. Again, I hadn't posted since February. There was that live stream yesterday, but it got deleted due to copyright. So I am going to be here. I'm going to be live streaming. I've been live streaming a lot on Twitch, actually, but not in the past week. I live streamed once this past weekend on Twitch, um, but not in the past week, just because I've been so caught up in Pet Cemetery, reading that book, that the time I would have been live streaming, I've been reading. Whoa, it got dark outside. I don't know if you guys saw how dark it's getting here, or maybe that's just a trick of my eyes adjusting to the sun. Yeah, very strange. Oh, I actually wanted to say something for those that like. Let's see if I have it here. There's two books I wanted to talk about, two separate things. So this one and doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo. I have two books here. Diamond by Matthew Hart. I don't know if you guys have ever read this. This is not a work of fiction. This is a work of truth, and it explains about companies that sort of have claimed land and famous diamonds and blood diamonds and all sorts of interesting things that happen in this world around the diamond trade. And it's very similar to things that happen with the orchid trade. If you've ever read Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean, another really, really good book about how people lie and steal and cheat and, go into dangerous places, hire people to go into dangerous places, get rare orchids, illegal orchids, how they're imported, and how the orchids are used for different things. Orchid Thief could be said to be a book sort of. Just a really interesting book about a certain very particular culture. This is a book about the diamond trade and diamond cultures in our society. And it's just interesting, I think, for metal detectors, not only to know about the metals, but sometimes we get diamonds. Ooh, that's very shiny with the black and white filter on. Wow, looks pure white. Just to know about that. So, I get distracted. I don't have as much ADHD as Meryl does, though, I think. And another one I really like, um, and this, I think there might be a newer edition, because I got this older edition of this book. But Merrill was posting recently on his Instagram. He has an Instagram, Melotechnic New York City, and he's been trying to get more active there, more active on social media. But he posted that with a black light, you can see certain gemstones sort of have a luminescence, which is really awesome. So I have a book, because you could look everything up online, but I like to look in a book. I like to have a physical thing where I could always refer to and have it at home and just look at. So this is a book called Gemstones, and I'm going to do a little bit of magic here. Just give me a second, because the filter here doesn't really give this book. There you go. Hey, I'm in color. What's that about? The filter here doesn't really help with all the colors on the cover. It just talks about different gemstones and rocks, and you know, it's sort of like a. It's not a guide to geology. I wouldn't say it's like it could replace any geology textbook for how things are formed, but it does go over the chemical compositions and how to identify certain things. So if you get sort of a tourmaline, for example, and you don't know what that is, you could just look it up. Or, I think you can actually search by color here. Uh, Origin of structures, gemstones, the properties of different gemstones, such as its hardness, its density, its clearness, like if it's cloudy, things like that. So yeah, they talk about all different types of gemstones and rocks and lesser known gemstones. Really, really cool. I really enjoy this one. One of the gemstones I like. It. Maybe you guys have heard of it. It's called moissanite. Have you guys ever heard of a moissanite? It's a really, really cool gemstone. Let me see if I find it here on the list. If I don't find it here on the list, I could go to the back. So moissanite is sort of like a diamond, right? It's sort of like a diamond. It's clear. It's clear like a diamond. If you see it, you might confuse it for a diamond. And it doesn't really occur naturally here on Earth. If it does, you can make it in a lab, but it doesn't really occur naturally. It occurs sort of in small impurities in other types of gemstones. But moissanite that's made in a lab has actually been found naturally in outer space. So it's a gemstone that sort of only exists in outer space. And when it's cut like a diamond, it's more brilliant. It reflects light more than a diamond would. Yeah, hey Ray Gonzalez, how you doing? Welcome to the show. Let me put back the color correction just because I like this mood better. So yeah, I learned about moissanites through reading, you know, gemstones and looking it up. And in the back, you could just look up all different types of gemstones. And I recommend, everybody. It doesn't have to be this book. It doesn't have to be Gemstones of the World. It doesn't have to be the newly revised 5th edition, by Walter. This is actually old and out of date now. I'm pretty sure there's a new one because this was produced. What was the year? A while ago. I have this book in my collection for quite some time now. There you go. 2013. It was translated to English in 2013. So, but I do recommend that you get yourselves a reference and you flip through it and you look through it. Something with pictures, something that's going to keep you interested, something that you get to learn, even if it's not a precious gemstone, just a rock. Different types of rocks. For example, turquoise and how a turquoise might look. The black and white filter isn't doing the book justice with how beautiful some of these stuffs is. It goes over everything, jade, marble, onyx, all different types. And it doesn't really work as you can get an idea of what kind of rock you have by looking at the colors, looking at the size, getting an idea like that. And it'll give you a good, you can look up all the different birthstones and everything. But yeah, so gemstones of the world and Diamond. Definitely recommend you guys read through Diamond because it's such a good book. Again, I'll pull it out here. I had put it away, but it's all right. Definitely recommend you guys read Diamond by Matthew Hart. Gives an interesting look into the diamond trade of this world, and why are things called blood diamonds, and why do the diamond companies own so much land, and who what's their name, the De Beers are, and stuff like that. It's such a good story. And if you really like this, I also recommend Orchid Thief. It's sort of the same book, but with orchids. Very interesting as well. That's basically what I have time for today, guys. At 5 o'clock, my wife gets off, and we're going to head out to the supermarket. We haven't been shopping at the supermarket for a few days, so we need a few things. But thanks for stopping by. And again, I just finished Pet Sematary. If you're watching this after, or if you just came in at the end, basically I finished Pet Sematary. I finished Pet Sematary today by Stephen King, and I really enjoyed that book. And I am looking forward to reading through The Talisman. And so maybe in a few days I'll do another live stream about The Talisman. And I might do another live stream tomorrow at a later time, later than this. I was doing this early because I knew I had to leave soon. So yeah, I have a mask. We have the disposable ones. So we have a box of masks. Thank you for your concern, actually, because you see in the news all those people sort of in the parks without masks, uh, and the cops are like handing them out or giving people tickets, and it's getting sort of serious where they're taking this order to social distance and everything. Oh, sorry about the glare. uh they're taking that order very seriously. Yeah, it's just weird. I can see I can't see myself going out to metal detect with all the extra protective gear. I really hope to wait till this is all over so that we can go out the way we were before. Indiana Tones, you just missed it. You just missed it, but it's okay because I got you. I got you. Uh, Everything that we talked about. My video from yesterday got taken off because of copyright. Oh, you're going to edit other videos while you listen? Okay, that's fine because I'm only going to be here for like a minute or two more. So just quick things to review before I let go. My video yesterday got taken down because of copyright. I'm still planning on making videos on YouTube. The reason I haven't was because of the whole COVID-19 thing, and I don't have a job, so I'm not really going out. But I didn't want to leave the channel without content for so long. That's why I'm planning on doing live streams more often. I finished reading Pet Sematary. It was a wonderful, wonderful story. The Wendigo, creepy. The Indian Wendigo and Wendigo psychosis. We spoke about that too, and we spoke about the mist and the other dimensions that Stephen King has created. Very good. And then I was also recommending other books. Not this one. Don't get this book. It's too expensive actually because it's out of print and it's over wordy and it's ghost stories. They're better ghost stories than Rod Serling's Twilight Zone. But yeah, I had recommended Diamond by Matthew Hart and some gemstone book just to have a reference of. So thanks guys for watching. I'm going to leave you with my sort of intro as an outro, and I'll let it play for a few minutes. I'll probably end the stream at 5:05. Just to have sort of a cool down period. So thanks for coming by, guys. And again, I do plan to have another live stream, maybe just half an hour tomorrow. What time is good for everyone? I think this was a bit too early. I started at 4:30 today. So maybe tomorrow I'll start at 6. I think 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So we'll do that for tomorrow. We'll shoot for 6 o'clock. I'll see you guys. Ciao.
There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, of light, a dimension of mind. You're moving into the land of both shadow and objects, of both things and idea. You've just crossed into the detecting zone. There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, of light, a dimension of mind. You're moving into the land of both shadow and objects, of both things and idea. You've just crossed into the detecting zone. There is a dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is as vast as the beach where things are lost into infinity. It is the ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the bottom of a man's soul and the depth of his sensitivity. This is the dimension of anticipation, a dimension we call the detective zone. I'm about to uncover another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of depth. A journey into the wondrous land of New York. The next stop, the detecting zone. You unlock this door with a key known as a detector. Beyond it is another dimension.